Good morning, dear teacher. My name is Isabel, and this opportunity I am going to give you some tips to teach direct, indirect, and oblique objects. Studying the relationship that are maintained between complementary verbs and nouns according to the syntactic position of the noun phrases within each clause, it is vital to remember the role of a subject and an object in a clause. Subject. It is always a noun phrase formed by a proper noun that executes the verb, such as Marie, she, books, etc. Object. The object is the person or thing affected by the action of the verb. For example, I read a book. Book is the object created by the action of reading. And there are three kinds of objects: direct, indirect, and oblique. Direct object. It is a noun or pronoun that is affected directly by the action of the verb. The direct object follows the verbs in the active clause. However, clauses function as a direct object too. Here, there are two suggestions for teaching students to identify direct object in an English class that could be very helpful. First, one tip for recognizing the direct object in a class is by finding a transitive verb and teaching students that the direct object answers the question what or whom after a transitive verb. For example, the girls collect flowers. The direct object appears after a transitive verb collect. So the flowers are the direct object because they answer the question what do the girls collect? Another tip to teach direct object is that they follow a pattern in a declarative sentence, but this function can also be realized by a clause. For example, they exchanged gifts. This is a declarative sentence, and the direct object is the word gifts, and so that sentence follows the pattern subject, verb, and direct object. In the same way, they want to receive gifts. This is a to-infinitive clause, and the direct object is the clause to receive gifts. So that clause follows the pattern subject, main verb, and direct object within a to-infinitive clause. Indirect object. This is the recipient of the direct object. So the direct object says who or for whom the action of the verb is performed. Indirect objects cannot exist in a sentence that does not have a direct object. There are two tips to teach indirect objects. An indirect object is always a noun or pronoun which is not part of the prepositional phrase, and they answer the question for whom or for what the action of the verb is done. For example, I gave Nicholas a gift. Nicholas is the noun phrase functioning as the indirect object. Another example, I bought her flowers. The indirect object is her, so it answers the question, who did I buy flowers for? Another tip is that indirect object only appears with the transitive verbs, so the transitive verbs require both indirect and direct objects, and they follow this pattern: subject, verb, direct object, more indirect object. For example, I gave Luciana a pair of shoes. The indirect object is the name Luciana, and the direct object shoes. Oblique object. That type of object was recently implemented by syntax, and an oblique object is any noun phrase preceded by a preposition. There are two tips to teach oblique objects. One tip for teaching oblique object is to explain the most important characteristic for recognize them. So an oblique object occurs in a prepositional phrase such as in, for, about, etc. For example, I opened the chest with a key. The chest is the direct object, and the preposition with indicates as the oblique object. Another tip to teach oblique objects is doing students recognize that the oblique object cannot get an alternate position because they doing it, the clause changes its sense. For example, I watched a movie about a child prodigy. In that sentence, the oblique object is about a child prodigy. However, I watched the child prodigy a movie. Changing the oblique object of position, the sentence acquires another sense. For that reason, the child prodigy is an oblique object. To conclude, direct, indirect, and oblique objects are important complements of the noun phrases in a clause because they help us to clarify our message. Therefore, these tips are intended to teach students to recognize them in an easy way.